So let's talk about a game that has managed to stir both nostalgia and curiosity the moment it was announced. A game that made longtime fans jump out of their seats and newcomers scratch their heads asking, wait, what's all the hype about? That's right. Today we're diving into Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles. And let me tell you, this isn't just a remaster slapped with a fancy name. And it isn't exactly a full-blown remake either. It's something carefully crafted in between. And the end result is fascinating, frustrating, and fascinating again, depending on the angle you look from. So stick around, because by the end of this review, you'll know exactly whether this journey into Ivalice is for you, or if your backlog can breathe a sigh of relief for a little while longer. Now, before we march into the battlefield of opinions, let's clear up the basics. Final Fantasy Tactics, the Ivalice Chronicles, has launched on PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and PC via Steam. Sorry, Xbox folks, once again you're left holding the please clap sign, but hey, with Square Enix, platform favoritism is practically part of the tradition at this point. The release is cross-generational, which means you can enjoy it on your shiny new PS5 or your trusty old PS4 that sounds like a jet engine every time you boot up a game. Either way, the goal here is accessibility, making a tactical RPG classic available to a new generation while hopefully giving veterans something fresh enough to revisit. Notice how I said hopefully? Yeah, that's going to become a theme. So how does it actually feel to play? If you've never touched the original Final Fantasy Tactics, the basic loop is that it's a grid-based tactical RPG where you position units on a battlefield, take turns moving them around, and unleash attacks or abilities in ways that force you to think several steps ahead. It's chess with swords, but instead of pawns and rooks, you've got knights, black mages, monks, and even those weird classes that only make sense once you've lost 3 battles experimenting with them. And the first thing you'll notice in Ivalice Chronicles is that the developers haven't broken the DNA of what made this game beloved in the first place. This is still very much Final Fantasy Tactics, with all the deliberate pacing, brain-burning decisions, and brutal consequences of screwing up your positioning by just one tile. If you're the type of player who thrives on strategy, this is pure candy. But if you came here expecting a fast-paced romp where battles are over in 5 minutes, you're about to get humbled in a way that might have you staring at your screen wondering if you accidentally booted up a math exam. Speaking of pacing, one of the criticisms of the original was how battles sometimes dragged on longer than necessary. Ivalice Chronicles tries to fix this with quality-of-life updates. Things like faster animations, smarter auto-battle options, and improved UI flow make a massive difference. It's still a methodical game, but you're not forced to watch a black mage slowly wave their arms like they're conducting an orchestra every single time they cast fire. The developers clearly knew they had to respect people's time in 2025, and while they didn't go overboard with speed-ups like some modern remasters do, the little tweaks here genuinely add up. Still, don't expect instant gratification. This is a game where patience is part of the design, and sometimes patience feels rewarding, but sometimes patience feels like you're being tested by a sadistic professor. Now, let's talk story. But don't worry, I'm not spoiling anything here, because trust me, you want to experience this one clean. The narrative of Final Fantasy Tactics has always been its crown jewel. It's a political drama set in a medieval-style fantasy world filled with betrayal, power struggles, and morally gray characters. Ivalice Chronicles keeps all of that intact, and the remastered presentation makes it easier than ever to follow along. The localization has been touched up, the dialogue is less clunky, and the delivery feels more natural. Back in the day, some people got lost in the dense writing, but here the flow is smoother. It's still heavy stuff, though. This isn't your typical Final Fantasy where a plucky teenager saves the world with the power of friendship. This is more like Game of Thrones but with chocobos. And depending on your taste, that's either the most exciting thing ever or the fastest way to put your younger cousin to sleep. But stick with it, because the payoff is worth it, and the intrigue has that slow burn quality that keeps your brain buzzing even after you put the controller down. Visually, Ivalice Chronicles takes a really interesting approach. Instead of going full HD 2D remake like Square did with Octopath Traveler, they've chosen a hybrid style that blends the original's pixel art charm with modern lighting, textures, and character portraits. At first glance, it might feel like you're looking at a beautiful diorama, like someone rebuilt the old game using today's tools, but without erasing the soul of the original. And I'll be honest, some people are going to love this direction, and others are going to hate it. On PS5 and PC, it looks sharp and detailed, but on Switch, you can tell corners were cut to keep performance steady. It's not ugly, far from it, but don't expect jaw-dropping visuals that compete with modern AAA games. This is still a remaster of a strategy RPG from the 90s, not a visual flex for Unreal Engine 5. On the subject of performance, the good news is the game runs buttery smooth on PS5 and PC. Frame rates are locked, load times are basically non-existent, and the whole experience feels snappy. On Switch, it's a little less consistent, with occasional dips and some fuzziness in handheld mode, but still entirely playable. If you're planning to take Ivalice on the go, just know you're sacrificing some polish. Controls are responsive across all platforms, although the learning curve is steep if you're new to tactical RPGs. The game does a better job of explaining itself this time around, but don't expect hand-holding. You're still going to stare at the job system for a good 10 minutes trying to figure out why your archer suddenly decided to start moonlighting as a time mage. That's part of the charm, though, and part of the headache. Now, let's not forget about the soundtrack, because, oh man, this is one area where Ivalice Chronicles absolutely shines. Hitoshi Sakamoto's score has been lovingly remastered, and it's just glorious. Those sweeping orchestral tracks that made battles feel like life-or-death moments are back, sounding richer than ever. It's one of those soundtracks where you almost don't mind losing a fight because, hey, at least the music is a banger. And if you're the kind of person who leaves the game running just to soak in the atmosphere, you're going to be in heaven. Sound effects have also been updated to carry more punch, and voice work, while limited, adds some extra personality without overstaying its welcome. Now, here's where things get tricky: accessibility. Square Enix has made strides, adding features like adjustable text sizes, colorblind modes, and the ability to tweak difficulty in subtle ways. But the reality is, Final Fantasy Tactics is still a tough game. This isn't like modern RPGs where you can slide difficulty all the way down and breeze through. Even with the new options, battles demand attention, and you can't just autopilot your way to victory. That means some players are going to bounce off hard, and that's important to know before diving in. For veterans, this is a plus. It keeps the soul intact. For newcomers, it might feel like the game is gatekeeping. I guess you could say accessibility here is like the doorway into a castle. Technically, it's open, but you still have to climb over a moat and avoid the alligators. Now, replay value, though. Off the charts. The job system alone is a playground that begs to be experimented with. Want to turn a knight into a monk, into a samurai, into a calculator? Go for it! The game encourages wild combinations, and because battles play out differently depending on your choices, no two playthroughs ever feel the same. Add to that the branching storylines and hidden content, and suddenly you realize you've sunk 100 hours into this thing without even noticing. It's the kind of game that rewards obsessive players, and if you're the type who likes wringing every drop out of a system, this is going to keep you busy for months. Now, let's get real for a second. Is Ivalice Chronicles innovative? Not exactly. It's more of a careful restoration than a bold reinvention. Compared to something like the Trials of Mana remake, which completely reimagined its systems, this game is much more conservative. And that's both its strength and its weakness. On one hand, longtime fans will appreciate that nothing vital was tampered with. On the other, newcomers might wonder why this doesn't feel as modernized as some other Square Enix reworks. It's like visiting a museum where they've polished the floors and repainted the walls, but the exhibits are still very much relics from the past. Beautiful relics, yes, but relics nonetheless. So here's the part everyone loves, the pros and cons. Let's start positive. The pros are clear: a timeless tactical RPG brought into the modern era, quality of life improvements that genuinely smooth out rough edges, a breathtaking soundtrack that holds up as one of the best in the series, a complex and mature story that feels fresh even decades later, and replay value that's practically endless. On top of that, the new art style, while divisive, gives the game a unique identity that bridges old and new. For fans who grew up with the original, this is the definitive way to revisit Ivalice. Now the cons. The game is still unapologetically slow-paced, and while the improvements help, battles can drag, especially early on. The learning curve is steep, and even with tutorials, it can overwhelm new players. Performance on Switch isn't ideal, and the art style, while interesting, won't please everyone. Accessibility has improved, but it's still not enough to fully open the door to casual audiences. And perhaps most importantly, the lack of significant innovation means that if you were hoping for a completely new take on Final Fantasy Tactics, you might leave feeling underwhelmed. It's polished, yes, but not revolutionary. At the end of the day, Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles is exactly what it promises to be. A chance to relive or discover one of the most influential tactical RPGs ever made, now with the polish it deserves. It's not perfect, and it doesn't pretend to be, but for those willing to invest the time, the rewards are immense. This is a game that asks for your patience, your brain power, and your willingness to occasionally scream into a pillow when your carefully planned strategy collapses in flames. And if you give it that, it